Welcome, everybody, to the Table Rush Talk Show. I'm your host, Mischa Zvegintzov, and in this episode, I sit down with Martin Pietrzak, the visionary CEO behind Pinch Marketing, to discuss the evolving landscape of digital marketing in the tech and startup sectors. We explore Martin's 2-decade journey, his firm's unique approach to B2B digital marketing, and the stories of resilience and innovation that have propelled his career forward. This insightful conversation sheds light on the power of strategic marketing, the role of content in customer engagement, and the personal motivations that drive industry leaders like Martin. Welcome, Martin, to the show.
Misha, thank you so much for the intro. Yes, that's what we do. So thank you for that. I much appreciate it. I'm super happy to be on your show.
Indeed, Martin. We were talking before we hit record here, and I liked the way you framed the content you wanted to bring to the show today. And specifically, you talked about the idea of a table rush. And why don't you retell me what your thoughts were in that regard? Yeah.
Yeah, I looked at so I listened to some of your shows in the past, and we talked briefly about sort of the mandate and who we're trying to talk to, and the whole table rush, and I guess what stands behind the name, and what made me think about is how do we continue not only to inspire others and with what we do, and like you said, make them take out their credit cards and give us their money, but I think more importantly, how do we inspire ourselves? It made me think of my own career, my own marketing journey, and just generally just entrepreneurial paths that I've taken, and there's a few of them. Some are on LinkedIn, others are just not. But some are failed, some are, but they're all stepping stones and learning lessons. And I just thought about myself today, like what keeps me inspired to keep going and to reinvent myself, because I think that's what the world requires these days.
I love that. So let's dig into that a little bit. What well, that might be a good follow-up question. What does keep Martin inspired these days? Keep pulling you forward. But first, maybe let's dive into pinch marketing and what
Mhm.
exactly is that, and tell us what's going on with pinch marketing. I mean, you're helping companies like Microsoft, Xerox. I'm imagining some smaller companies as well, but
Mhm.
what's going on there?
Yeah, so it's speaking of pinch, there's a good reason why it's called pinch marketing, and it was born out of need. There was a situation at the company that I was working with, and it essentially forced me to be creative about, my next steps, and that's how pinch was born, out of need. So we created a marketing agency. We were already some couple of my partners, we're all coming from a tech background, so I think we're all inspired by the technology space, the whole industry, and just some of the pains that I think that we kept hearing about, and then we felt, hey, maybe this is our turn to take our own path down that road, right? And yeah, sometimes bad situations and an employer drives you to come up with something new and innovative. So speaking of being inspired, regardless if I wanted to or not, I had to make some changes. I had to do something new, and I think that's kind of like. Uh, the source of inspiration is just what happens into you, right? Sometimes, you're forced in situations that make you feel like you need to get creative. Giving up is not an option. So it's always, I think that the idea that we need to iterate and be agile, have personal grit and just grow. So I think that's kind of like the story behind that.
I love that. I love that, that grit, that resilience. One of my favorite sayings, which you alluded to, is necessity is the mother of invention,
That's right.
right? It's sometimes it's nice to be inspired out of. I read this book, which I love, love, love. It's called A Return to Love. It's by
Mhm.
Marianne Williamson, and and I'm going to go down a rabbit hole with you, and maybe we can riff on this a little bit. But
Sure.
there's the idea of pain as the touchstone of growth, of course, right? Or necessity is the mother of invention. Or, you and I have both been divorced, so we've come out of that fire, and what creativity or change has that forced, right?
Mhm.
But Marianne Williamson brought up this idea of, well, hey, what if love was the touchstone for change or growth instead of pain, right? So I think in a perfect world, we're all inspired because we're moving from the heart, which I love when I'm in that space or in that realm of creativity. But then there is the harsh reality of that pain is the touchstone of growth. Uh, there's a lot for you. Maybe riff on that a little
Yeah,
bit. Or
yeah. I think I agree with you. I think, like you said, there's tough moments, tough situations in life, regardless of what personal, professional, or otherwise. I think that tackle us to say, okay, what do you do next? And I think we have choices. We can either give up and do nothing, or we can hopefully find something positive, like you said, draw the inspiration and, like you said, maybe love, to motivate you to do something different. And you know, one reason I think, going back to the pinch story and why we were felt inspired, is that we felt that there's still a lot of pain out there in the tech space, and we wanted to help some of our clients. You know, we work, when I say we work with Microsoft, we work with Microsoft and, more importantly, their partners, and we help to enable them. And usually the smaller organizations, they may not have a lot of marketing or the know-how, so they need a bit of assistance and help. And we always the reason I love what we do at Pinch Marketing is that every client is different, and every client has its somewhat different pain point. And I find it's inspiring, and that's what drives me, is this idea that I can innovate, I can try new things. And I think just in life, right, I think that bad moments in life might be painful for a period of time to force you into something new and some new path. And I think that's why I like, and as much as I hate to say that I love pain, but I think it does inspire us to sort of rethink, find something new to talk about, be creative. I think those are the things that really, truly, I think, are positive.
yes, I love that. Thank you for that. And I'm anybody who's listening or watching this can go to pinch.marketing. Again, pinch.marketing and check out what Martin is up to. And really, what you want to do is scroll down to the very bottom and put in your name, email, and phone and hit submit with your message. And then you can have direct contact with Martin and or his team, I'm assuming. Um, but
Hmm.
one of your who we help sleep at night. And then we go into these big companies or perhaps these big companies partners that you help. And again,
Hmm.
we've got Microsoft, Lenovo, Xerox, and there's others that perhaps I've not heard of, Sketchbox, the Descartes, Longview, and there's a list of others.
Right.
But who we help sleep at night. Talk to me about that. How is pinch marketing helping people sleep at night?
I think the nature of the beast, so to speak. I think the tech sector has interesting um, solutions to some of the challenges that their partners have. And a lot of companies that are enabled use something called MDF, or marketing or market development funds. So this is how the big Microsoft companies or the Ciscos of the world, they help their partners go to market with some of their solutions, or either directly reselling their solutions, or maybe using their technology to sell their own product or service. The challenge with that MDF model is that it's usually this has a lot of limitations in terms of what you can or cannot do, and it's usually a small period of time when you can use those funds. So it's usually a quarter. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these partners, they don't have the resources, they don't have the talent and know-how, so they require to execute quickly, and hopefully do it not just quickly, but more importantly, with the strategy in mind, their customer in mind, solving problems, and ultimately driving business and business opportunities for their partners or themselves. So that's why I think Pinch comes in, is because not only do we only hire the people who truly understand the technology space, and we have some know-how in that. So like when we help partners about their cloud solutions, they don't need to explain to us how it works. We get it. Like, we understand these technologies. What we help them with is really just to find the unique voice and trying to help them bubble up that story that's really going to resonate for their customer. You know, everybody can work with cloud providers like AWS or Microsoft or Google. The challenge is, how do you take that narrative, take that story, and make it your own? Maybe you're a healthcare organization dealing, creating software that helps health practitioners. Well, that's a very different story than perhaps, another company that does cloud storage and security services, right? But in the beginning, when we start talking to them and early on, it's usually the narrative is like, oh, we can do everything for everyone. So we help them find what is that unique story that's going to really appeal to their what we call ICP, or ideal client profile, right? Ultimately, you want to know who you're selling to, what problems are you solving, and we're trying to help them get there hopefully faster than with it quicker, and then creating something more creative and that's going to resonate with their audiences.
I love that. Uh, I love the ICP, ideal client profile, or avatar, or your perfect customer. There's so
That's
many
right.
different terms out there for that right now. And I think it's very powerful the way you've talked about that as far as a big company or a bigger company versus a solopreneur or a consultant or
Mhm.
a coach, something like that. You're saying, hey, not only does that smaller solopreneur need to do that, but hey, we're doing the same thing for big companies or
That's right.
bigger companies or mid-sized companies. We've all got the same problems. You've got to figure out, dial in, and perhaps make a commitment to an ideal client profile.
That's right. And I think the bigger the organization, maybe the more opportunity for them to be to everything to everyone, because they have the resources to be able to do that. But the smaller we go, like you said, the solopreneurs and small medium enterprise, in order to compete with the big players out there, you really need to find your niche, right? You need to find out like what is a unique uh not just the story, but what are you really, really good at? What are you the best at? And I think when I talk to CEOs of small organizations, they always think, oh, if everybody just knew about my product, they would just buy it like that, it would just fly off the shelf. Well, guess what? It's That's one of the first mistakes we find, is that it's too broad. The message is too broad, and nobody quite hears that story and goes, oh, that's me you're talking to. People want to feel like they're talking to their customer, and the customer needs to feel like they're being heard, especially today, right? There's so many messages, so much. The volume of data, news, and all that stuff is so overwhelming. In order to cut through the clutter, you really need to have a message that's gonna, like you said, people go, "Oh, they're talking to me. I get it. Okay, now I'm gonna listen." So I think first, the marketing now is about capturing, inspire people to do something that's going to make people feel like you want to listen to you in the first place. That first 8 seconds, like what are you going to say in the first 10 seconds that people are going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to give my attention to these guys for just a minute and see if I want to do more of that. I think that's more important than ever nowadays. With attention spans shrinking, we need to really hit up people with something that's going to really truly resonate.
I love that. This is great, Martin. I think of them in terms of hook, story, offer, right?
That's
What's
right.
the hook? What's that first 7 seconds? What is your story? And you've already spoken the story. You've probably said, get your story in line or some version of that 3 or 4 or 5 times in the limited amount of what we've been talking. Then, of course, there's the offer. So you got to hook them, got to tell your story, and then you've got to make a compelling offer.
Hmm.
Um, Russell
Yeah,
Brunson.
let
Oh,
me
go ahead.
let me
Oh, go.
yeah, what I think was is interesting, what I find is that when I say this to people, people go like, "Yeah, but I don't know what that storyline is," and it's okay. And I think that's what we help them with. We talk to them, we ask them questions, we try to extract that intelligence that they have. Most people have something called knowledge curse, right? They know so much about their business, they assume everybody knows. And then by asking them, having a conversation with them, it's easy to derive and say, "Hey, you have so much interesting insight. You have so much intelligence and so much um, knowledge that you should be able to share with the world. Let's just help you figure out what that is and what that narrative is, and then come up with ideas of what maybe 3 themes or stories that you want to test out." And because of digital marketing, it doesn't have to be expensive. You can do a test in a day. You can come up with three different narratives with three different creatives, launch it to the people that you think you want to go talk to in LinkedIn, and do these message tests. And you can figure out what's going to truly resonate. And within a day, guaranteed, you're going to have the definitive answer which profile and which theme and then which story resonates the most. So I think we have these tools these days that allow us to really test what resonates with the people that we want to talk to way easier than it was in the past. So I think that's what the tools give us today. So if you're an entrepreneur or anyone, a consultant or anybody out there, my recommendation is like, don't be afraid. Come up with some of these ideas that you think may resonate and test them out. That's in relatively easy ways to do that.
I love that. That is beautiful. You've touched on so many things. So if everybody just heard about my product, I think is what you said, or if everybody just knew about my product,
Right.
or if everybody just knew about what I did. And that's a common statement, whether you're a CEO of a fledgling web company that's got a whole bunch of money behind them, or the solopreneur. It's if everybody just heard my story, right? Or knew about what I did. And then I like how you talked about dialing that down and the knowledge curse. I'm going to borrow the knowledge curse. That is a great term.
Go for it. No charge there on this one. Yeah, it's
Go
it's
ahead.
it's you know, and the other thing is that our clients usually are in the B2B sector. So whatever they're selling or offering to the world is can be really, really complex. And because of that knowledge curse, sometimes they talk over the customer, assuming that the customer understands. So you need to take that complex information and make it digestible. And there's ways of, breaking down that content, the complexity of it into these using creativity, like maybe some, creative small chunks that really going to feed the narrative of that story you want to tell. Um, and maybe like use interactivity or visuals or tell a different story with different mediums, right? Like most people these days, especially the ones who are super busy, that I think they're reading less because they have less time. So they will watch quick snippets here and there, maybe on YouTube, maybe on Instagram, maybe on switching channels, but really, really quick. So I think there's ways of presenting what you do in a way that's going to be much more digestible and relevant, but also engaging. And I think that's the one thing that you have to tackle yourself and test it out with friends and family maybe at the start and say, hey, what I'm saying, does that make sense to you? Because ultimately you want to make sure that it's understandable to anybody, not just the professionals who you think you're talking to. Because even in the IT space that I'm in, a lot of the IT pros, they tell us like, just don't throw buzzwords at me. Just tell me how this is going to help my day to be better, easier, more productive. How do I elevate my role in the business? So I think talking over customers is a big problem we find is like, using buzzwords and technical terms. Dumb it down a little bit. And I'm not saying that because your clients are dumb. I'm saying dumb it down because of what's in your head. Like you probably have too much knowledge and you're trying to convey that complexity with something that you just think it's easy to others, right?
Yes, I great thought stream. I think about it this way. uh, 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 we can talk in techno babble,
That's right.
right? And we can, it's common language to us, so we assume it's common language to everybody else,
Mm,
right?
that's right.
And I think about too, especially if you're on the tech side of things and you're a few steps ahead in some creative technology that's helping companies, it's going to be really easy to talk over somebody's head and lose them. Um, the way that I talk about solving that problem is using a kind of like bridge. So you can talk in the techno
Hmm.
babble a little bit and then say, which is kind of like saying, we're the gas for your fire or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or does that make sense or does that
Oh,
resonate at all?
absolutely. I have two terms to describe it. In our my own world in my own company, we talk about and we challenge our customers with the same terminology. We say, and the acronym, there is an acronym for this, but I'm not going to give it to you. It's
Oh, darn it.
what's in it for me, right? Like ultimately, you can talk to people, but you have to ask yourself a question. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the customer saying, and the customer says, okay, what's in it for me? Right? Like, how is whatever you're telling me going to benefit me? Why do I care? What's the so what? Right? And I think you have to get to that really quickly these days. So if you can't get to the so what aspect and what's in it for me quickly, you're gonna lose them, right? So it's not about talking more, it's about talking um, in in the terms of what really going to address the concerns that your customer may have. And that's the key.
That's cool. Please tell me what the acronym is, and then we can dumb it down for
Well,
somebody's.
well, it's really what's in it for me, like every beginning letter, but I can't really pronounce it right now, to be honest. Like, so I think we have to skip. I'll do it
Okay,
later. I'll give it
okay,
to you
it's
later.
perhaps not
Um,
appropriate for.
but for audiences, no, it really is just what's in it for me. It's one of those unpronounceable acronyms I should have probably saved myself from.
I got
Um,
it.
but yeah, and I think that the challenge I find because we're so biased and we're not even aware of it. Um, I always ask when we talk to our clients, I say to them, listen, in absence of me being able to talk to your customer about your solution so that I can hear from them what they care about, you have to have someone in the room, like a proxy for your customer in the room. So ideally, I love it for the tech companies. I love to talk to pre-sales architects or people who are business development people who work day to day with customers, so they understand what the customer wants. What are their pain points? So I usually the first thing I say to them is like, okay, put yourself in the seat of the customer and let's talk as if you were talking about your solution, but through the lens of that customer of yours. And that usually helps because the narrative naturally comes up. And they start refraining from talking about their product and solution, but rather talking about how their product and solution really helps to address the customer concerns and challenges. So I think we have to flip it around. So don't talk
Mm,
about your product. Talk about how you're solving people's problems. And I think that's
mm,
the key.
mm. Literally, here's the benefit. Here's the benefits that you're going to get. Speak to the benefits versus the
The features, yeah.
the features. Yeah. So how are people finding you and how does the conversation start? Well, like walk me through the process with one of your customers. You've spoke to it a little bit, but maybe talk to that process a little bit. Is that a valid question or a good question or
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously different ways we get our own customers. I mean, we've been very fortunate getting customers through referrals from, essentially customers recommending other customers, and that's been fantastic, which just speaks volume because we have our ambassadors that speak on our behalf, which is amazing, and we're super grateful. So if you're out there and listening, thank you. But we've been also doing a lot of going to a lot of events, shaking a lot of hands, connecting with people, doing our own social marketing, digital outreach, ABM strategies, trying to, reach people through LinkedIn, in-mails, things like that. So we
what
have
did you
to
say? ABM strategies?
ABM, so account-based marketing. So
Okay.
I guess I could speak briefly to this, but account-based marketing is think about regular marketing or broad in the broad sense is like you're trying to go to one to many, right? Well, ABM is the other way around. You're trying to be one to one as much as possible because it's rather me saying, "Hey, Mischa, you might care about pinch marketing because we do great service." I might say something to you, "Hey, Mischa, let's talk because I listened to some of your podcasts, especially to them when you talked about reflecting of your direction back in September, and you had this other AI person come on recently, Danny, and I was really intrigued by that. Let's talk about how AI has impacted your business." See, that's one-on-one, right? It's the ability to use my knowledge of you and create relevance and the dialogue that's going to make you much more likely to respond because you think, okay, this person is talking to me. not talking to just everybody. So that's really ABM in a nutshell. It's a strategic approach, which is like a sniper focus, trying to find relevance and hyper personalized approach. So that's account-based marketing. So
Can I
and I think
say
with
something to that? Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Finish your
go for it.
thought.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no, go,
please.
go.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that what I'm finding through my own growth trajectory in the online marketing, growing your business online, I'm old school, right? So my roots are telemarketing campaigns, building telemarketing teams, sending out flyer campaigns to get the phone to ring, things like that, right? My mentors back in the day were Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, definitely some networking. I can't remember their
Mhm.
names, but so I bring those tools myself into the new school marketing, the online marketing, which is very powerful because it's nice to have those old roots. But I think as we are able to dial in that hyper personalized message, so this accounts based marketing, once we dial that in, it's easy to start scaling that one to many or easier to scale that one to many, right? You get so
Mhm.
dialed in that now you can speak to that one, but you're able to project it to many. Am I saying that right? Or
Yeah, you got it right. I think what you've mentioned AI, and I think that's where AI's power can really help. Scaling ABM is difficult because of you have to do a lot of research, right? You got to figure out like who are the people that I want to talk to on an individual basis. So imagine before the world before then would have been let's say you buy a list, then you check every single contact, and you go on their LinkedIn profiles, their social profiles, and you check what do they talk about, what do they care about, what is their website, what is their product. You basically have to do manual research, either you or you outsource that work. And then hopefully by the time you have 100 people on that list, or maybe 200, after 2 weeks maybe you have this list, and now you have to actually write these communications to people, or you write yourself these scripts or talking points that you want to have through the phone or outreach or whichever way you want to do that. So that was a huge investment of time. And then you have to have, if you're in a bigger organization, you have to figure out what is the handoff look like from marketing to the sales organization, and are you going to be able to engage with the sales reps once they do their own work. So huge complexity, very time consuming, and not very scalable. With AI, though, is there's tools we're starting to experiment with that allow you to do that personalization on scale. That it goes, you upload a list, it goes into these different sources on the web that are publicly available, and it reads your profile and knows everything about you that you share publicly, and then it summarizes these points about, okay, what are the three major points this person cares about, and what are potential angles, and then you can say in the context of your services, it can actually provide you with personalized like actually writes the email for you. And then you can just say, okay, that looks good. Press send. So what used to take weeks to do, you can do in hours. So instead of doing that outreach for 100 people, you can do that outreach for 1,000 people in the same time frame, and probably at half the price because of the tools are available to you. So
mm,
that's where I'm seeing the future. I think with AI is probably one of those things, is this ability to personalize at scale.
amazing, amazing. Let's talk to you. Your customer walks in the door, you get them through referral, through accounts-based marketing, maybe through some of the AI tricks and tactics you just referenced. What is, and you spoke to this a little bit at the beginning of our conversation, to the customer problem or your
Mhm.
customer's problem. Maybe speak to that. What that person comes to you, what pain points are you hearing, or what are they saying to you? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's some common challenges. I think the one I'm kind of touched on already, this idea that they feel that whatever they're doing currently doesn't seem to stick, like it doesn't seem to resonate, or they're not seeing much of a response. They're not seeing even the metrics like open rates or response rates or engagement rates that, you would normally measure. They're just saying, hey, you know what? It doesn't seem to work. So they're like, we need something different, something new, and why is it not working for us? So that's sort of, I think, the most common one that I hear is that they feel like whatever they've been doing in the past is just not working anymore.
In regards to marketing.
In regards to marketing, so they've been doing email outreach, they've been doing some they've been creating like white papers, ebooks, and they see like, hey, nobody wants to fill out a form anymore. And I think the reason for some of these things that even though the content that they develop might be really contain a lot of good insight, um, the plethora of content out there is just insane these days, right? And people have so
And
much time.
yeah, and on an exponential growth arc of content, right?
That's right.
It's
Yeah.
not going to slow down. The pace of growth is just going to continue to accelerate. Thank you, AI as well.
Yeah,
But go on.
AI, and I think it's interesting concept, but at one point, you're seeing this proliferation of content, like you said, the exponential growth level, but at the same time, the value of content as a result is almost decreasing because it's not like people's attention spans are also going up. They're doing the opposite. So it's like you're like, okay, I'm producing this great piece of content, it has 20 pages, and nobody wants to download it, and God forbid, no, they don't want to give me the information. Why is that? Well, people have less time to consume this content, and also they're fearful of giving you their information right away because they're going to be picked, they feel like they're going to be called 30 seconds after they fill out a form. And all they wanted is just to educate themselves and maybe to learn a little bit more about you without having to commit to having to talk to a salesperson, having go through this exercise. They want to make up their mind first and build enough trust around that this transaction per se, right? They're getting a free piece of content, but these days, like one piece of content and hoping for the best is not going to work. You have to, it's like in marriage, right? Like you have to the small little things over a long period of time that's gonna be successful marriage versus, oh, I'm gonna take my wife, that's problematic, let's go to Hawaii once every 5 years and hope for the best. It's gonna solve our problems. And I think in marketing, it's something like that is similar. Like you have to build these stepping stones of trust, small things for free without any commitment, and the trust will build. And I think you can figure out like at which point that customer says, okay, now I want to be reached out to, now I want to have a conversation. So I think the old way is that you hope that you'll create a great piece of content that everybody will want to download and they'll give you information for it. And then you can call them up. I think that world is gone. I think that time is gone.
It's very interesting. You like the idea was have that great piece of content so that someone wants to download it now. And it's almost like you have to earn the right to offer someone that piece of content to download.
That's right.
Versus before, it was like, oh my gosh, this person has great content out of the gate. I want that. I want that downloadable thing, whatever it is, white
Right.
paper, video, who knows? We're now like which is backwards thinking to me, almost, right? It's like you would think as everything's accelerating, but that bit is decelerating. The
Mm.
Does that make sense, or
Yeah,
does it
I
just
mean, I think it goes hand in hand. I think that we talked about this, the world is changing, right? And that we have to, and I think we can thank our kids for that. Maybe with the TikTok generation, their, attention spans, I find myself, doing the same thing and, going YouTube shorts and going, oh, okay, cool, cool. It's so good at learning my algorithm, look what I like, and it feeds me the stuff. And I'm like, okay, one more, 15 seconds at a time. And I think, um, so the world, the way it's designed and how information is disseminated these days is unfortunately or unfortunately is going towards that way that we no longer have the patience to make this big investment up front without really knowing and saying, hey, is this, do I want to invest my time in this transaction with that one big piece of content? So my recommendation is like, yeah, have that one big piece of content, But we will take this piece of content, and maybe it's an ebook, maybe it's a white paper. We're gonna slice and dice it into different, a variety of different pieces. Some will be written, some will be video, some will be audio, some will be, people will learn different ways. People will be listening to this podcast. Maybe some people will be watching this podcast. We will have probably snippets of 15 seconds each promoting this content, right? So there is obviously a way to drive. No, if I just put this on this particular recording on my LinkedIn profile, chances that somebody's going to watch the full hour or 45 minutes is almost zero. But maybe if I have snippets of interesting parts that's 10 seconds long, maybe, and then spread it out and then drive some, excitement around this, the likelihood of them wanting to listen to the full thing is much higher then, right? So I think the idea is that take this one big piece of content, break it into smaller pieces, different mediums, and give it away for free. Don't make them pay by putting their information in. If they're not willing, they're not going to give it to you these days. So I think build that trust and then uh, hit them up, but way further down the line, right? Like allow them
Mm,
to build up the trust. I think
mm.
the statistics these days are ever changing, but I want to say a year ago it was 7 touch points. I think it's 15 touch points these days, meaning that
Wow.
you have to touch to someone digitally or otherwise. I mean, not physical touching, you know what I mean? But,
Yeah,
touching
absolutely.
15 times digitally in order for them to say, okay, you know what? I think they're ripe enough now to ask for something in return. And so the world is different, very different than it was before. And some of the challenges is that sometimes businesses, or especially smaller ones, they don't have the budget to do that. So they say, okay, I'm going to have one piece of content and hope for the best. Um, but I'm thinking do it differently, right? Like do micro learning approach, meaning give them small things over time. The cost is probably going to be the same. And then maybe when they're ready, like build something bigger, maybe do like a different kinds of approach, right? Maybe a webinar or some kind of conversation or even like something like this where it's hopefully not too much time and effort. So anyway, I feel like a long monologue, but hopefully that makes sense in terms of the approach. But I think that's sort of the evolution I'm seeing in the market.
That was an amazing riff, Martin. Thank you for
Riff,
that. There was
riff.
that
I
was
think we got to borrow that.
yes. Um, well, my mind is spinning as you're talking because clearly you've got so much knowledge and experience, and I heard you speak to a webinar there, which piqued my attention. So perhaps are you teaching your customers somewhere along the line how to do a webinar?
I think, many of my customers say they know how to do a webinar. They understand, they're experts at what they do. There's no question. Like I'm never positioning myself as the expert in whatever field that they're in, but hopefully I help them find that narrative that's going to make it compelling. And sometimes, like I said, I might challenge them and say, hey, instead of having like these huge slides where you have, a paragraph of 500 words at the font size of, three, that's why I'm saying this is not going to be very compelling presentation and conversation. I think webinars, I think that in itself, how they evolved over time has been before it was like again, one to many, right? You throw a slide, you talk to the slide and hope that people will engage. I think now what you have to do is like have a more of a actual conversation, a narrative, have a round table discussion, have a couple people ask them questions, allow people from the audience to participate in some way, either through polling, through quizzes, through being able to submit their own questions or even raise their hand, speak up. I think the whole engage and I think people, the audiences are demand that now. I think that ability to converse with their experts rather than just being talked at. And I think that's another thing. So do I help them develop the webinars? Only partially, and maybe in how they set it up, but not in the content itself. Like that's still them, all them. But it's all about this idea of like maybe the format and how they present it. That's something that we try to help them with for sure.
Yeah, to be more inspirational, like we talked about at the very beginning, inspire that anybody who's on the webinar or engaged with the webinar to take action. So you're saying, hey, here's a narrative to show you that we can solve your problem, so you're inspired to take the next step, whatever that is, join that email list, buy the product, buy the program, versus data dumping on somebody and just giving them too much information almost.
Exactly. I think that's what happens with yeah, so like I said, going back to a little bit, like, it's trying to taking that information dump and creating a narrative that's going to be engaging, number one. Number two, giving the end user, the ability to somehow interact with that content as they consume it. And then ultimately giving them an opportunity to say, how do I interact with it? But also, what do I do with that? Like, give me some ideas, some actual tips of the so what? Like, how do I take this insight and make it my own? So, that's why case studies have always been, and I think always will be, so popular because it puts the customer at the forefront, right? It says, how has my customer X, Y, and Z used what I give them and use it to their benefit? And that's why case studies, I don't think it will ever go away, is this idea of like, okay, help me imagine seeing myself through the eyes of your other customers and how they succeeded. And if they succeeded and they look like me, chances are I will also succeed because they did. And they look similar to what I do, what I had, similar challenges, maybe even similar industry, similar problem. I'm like, okay. So I think the storytelling through the eyes of their customer is a powerful way to do that.
Yeah, I think I have literally interviewed thousands of entrepreneurs in different countries across the United States, and a common theme is so many entrepreneurs are horrible at telling their customer stories. It's actually how I got involved in a lot of what I do. I'm like, oh my gosh, I literally will ask somebody, what's your favorite customer story? And they'll have to think. And it's not to create dramatic pause, it's because one doesn't come to mind. And then the next comment I'll get is one might come to mind. They'll tell me the story, and well, what's their name? Like, well, I don't know if I have permission to use it. I'm like, man, people need to start getting their customer stories, documenting their customer stories, getting those case studies, excuse me, get the permission, or be willing to ask for forgiveness. And I would
Mhm.
encourage anybody listening or watching this to, I would encourage them that their customers want you to tell their story. They do. And the illusion is that they don't, but they do. Maybe you could speak
Yeah,
to that
no,
for a
and
second.
it's an interesting challenge you're talking about because some of my customers to go through that, they say, "Oh, that customer," and imagine this, right? You're a seller of security solutions, like cybersecurity solutions, and you have a customer, and that customer, let's say it's a hospital, and all their patient records were stolen by a hacker. And now they're being held ransom literally for millions of dollars to why? Because someone at their organization potentially failed to secure that environment. So which of these clients wants to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I screwed up"? It's a rare occurrence that that particular customer is willing to sign their name on that case study. However, I think there's ways around that. I think you can talk to that narrative and talk about that customer story without naming names. I think there was, and I think people understand that, hey, you don't want to be on that end to be that IT person who wants to raise their hand and said, "Yep, I screwed up and it cost me millions of dollars to my company and I almost lost my job." And yeah, sure, I put my name on it, right? Nobody wants to do that necessarily, but I think there's ways of being able to tell that story um, in a way that's protecting their privacy and not having to name them. And then people who listen to that story, they understand that that's complex and it's a big price to pay to put your name down on something like that.
Right, right. And I appreciate that very much. That's a great frame you just created, right? Like to somebody that had a cyber security breach with hypersensitive information is not going
Yeah.
to want to say, yeah, we blew it and all our customer information was hacked or a section of it or whatever.
Yeah. And it's a
I
real
do
problem. It happens.
absolutely. I do challenge people. So for a while, and I still do this myself, I'm pretty fairly good at getting my customer testimonials and fairly good. Obviously when there's a win happening, ask. That's a great time to ask. Also, pay attention to your texts, your DMs, if you're out there on social media at all, look for the positive commentary that's coming your direction and make sure to screenshot it or save it or
Mm.
start building the systems to save, document, capture your customer story,
Yeah.
right? And even if it's micro wins or things like that, but I definitely challenge people to go. It's. I like to use like we could use divorce for example. You and I are both divorced, and perhaps it's like that pre-state. If I got a counselor and they helped me make it through the divorce, right? There's usually an ugly before counselor where I'm emotionally distraught. Perhaps I'm acting out in unpleasant ways, or, you know, the pain of my divorce is manifesting. Then you get a counselor, you get some help or a coach or something like that. And then, now relationship might be better with the ex-wife. Perhaps you've salvaged the relationship with your kids. Perhaps, the chemicals you were abusing to make it through tempered. I don't know. I'm just throwing all sorts of things out there. But what I have found is that it's like I would challenge that coach to say, "Hey, you're how am I trying to say this? Um, who's your favorite mentor that has helped you? Perhaps that you've paid for, and pick anybody in
Oh,
any industry company.
mentor that I paid for. I think I've been fortunate not to having to pay for it, but I mean, therapy definitely can help for sure. Um, uh, in terms of
Well,
going through tough challenges, but in terms of mentors, yeah, I've had some fortunate ex-bosses who I would consider them mentors, and I've been to enough events to talk to people who I was inspired by for sure. So I try to, like the master classes or TED Talks. I think there's ways of doing that without having to necessarily put a price to it, and they don't have to be one-on-one. But I try to, through books or even master classes or something like that, or tech talks, is to really feel finding some inspiration. And the Seth Godins of the world and the marketing world, but also like there's one TED Talk specifically that I always talk about. It's just like this Sir Ken Robertson or Rogerson. I'm probably butchering his name right now, but he was like a professor that wanted to talked about the need to reinvent education and how you can't treat all kids the same way. They all have different um, uh, what inspires them is different from one to another. So you can't just have this one system for all. Like you have to have more catered approaches. And what I draw inspiration from that is like this is how I try to treat my clients, right? Through the intake process, and the questions that I ask are, I try never put everybody in the same box. Like everybody has their own unique box. And I think that's what I'm inspired by some of these people way smarter than I am, is to hopefully draw some inspiration. In this case, some professor, who has a very different idea about education of kids. And I think, hey, why not take a similar approach with my customers? So yeah, there's folks out there that for sure I think have inspired me.
yeah, and so if Sir Ken Robertson heard this interview and Ken said, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea I was inspiring business people like that to change literally the way they intake their customers, where perhaps you were doing a poor job before and now you do an amazing job because you treat people as individuals having their own unique sets of problems, or however you frame that better than I
Yeah.
did." But if Sir Ken Robertson said, "Hey, Martin, would you give me a testimonial?" about how that TED Talk impacted you?
Oh, I would be honored. I mean, I'm trying not to fool myself that he would actually, he'll probably say, Martin, you say my name wrong. Get my name right. And then, yes, can I get a quote? Absolutely. There's no question. Like you said, I think ultimately, um, with customers, I think it's the same too. I think you got to work to that and seeing like, know your customer, right? Like hopefully when you ask a customer for a referral or a recommendation, a review, a testimonial, uh, hopefully they already set or give you some indication that they really like working with you, or they see they like the results. But I've been in situations where, somebody asked me for recommendation. I just really didn't feel comfortable with that. So there are situations I think you have to know the audience, and you have to double check, like, do they actually like working with you? Do they like what you do for them? Are they willing to take that step? Because it's a big ask
Yeah.
for them, especially if they represent a bigger entity. And we talked about that before, that sometimes there might be legal aspects of it. Maybe they have to have approval internally. So asking is that kind of like for a formal recommendation that's publicly available somewhere. Yeah, make sure you approach the right people in the right time. Yeah.
Yeah, you've just highlighted the incredible sensitivity that is out there. And the more you scale up corporate size, the more regulatory issues you have, the more people need to sign off and say yes, the more, someone in some department needs to say okay, and then they need to review it, and on and on and on and on. So I don't mean
But
to
but I
downplay.
but that being said, I think you said it too earlier. It's like, but if you don't ask, you don't get, right? Like, so don't be afraid of that either. But yeah, know your time. The timing is important. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask. If you don't ask, you won't get.
You
So
won't get.
they
Yeah.
can always say no, right? That's not shouldn't put them in a bad place. But I'm kind of curious. You said that, you've had a lot of people that you've interviewed that fall into this trap. So how do you get them out of that? Like, what's your method? Like, how do you get them out of that space where they're too much in their own world, and they don't understand the outside of it all? What do you do
Such a
differently?
great question. Yes, I've got my story bank, get your stories together framework.
Mm,
So you can tell the right stories at the right time and inspire your customers to action. So I have my customers start inventorying their stories, and I
mm,
have them inventory them according to stories. I start by story arcs. So what are the main story arcs of your life?
mm,
Or it could be what are the main story arcs of your business, for example. So for me, I have my recovery years. I was a raging alcoholic addict in my teen years,
mm,
and I was blessed to get into recovery. Thank you, Judge Rank. This is back in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It was my last day of high school. Judge Rank says, "Hey, you can go to jail for 6 months, or you can change your life. What's it going to be? Go to treatment," he said. And I was inspired to go to treatment, and it's been straight line uh, recovery, sobriety, clean time, call it what you will. But so my frame of reference oftentimes is through that modality, right? The recovery
mm,
modalities, 12-step modalities. I don't mean to go
mm,
down this rabbit hole with you, but it is important to. So I've got my recovery years, and I have my success years where it was growing the family, ton of success as a salesman, right? So there's that story arc, and then I've got the failure, divorce, death years, right? So
right.
all of a sudden, divorce, both my parents died in rapid succession. Kids are not acting like I want them to. And then, the final story arc now is rebirth. My rebirth into digital marketing, new entrepreneur endeavors, stuff like that. But then and bear with me here, and then it's within that, we've got our personal story. So you got your story arcs, and then what are my personal stories within that? What are my inspired people stories or mentor
Mm,
stories or impactful people stories, I call them, right? And then we've got our customer stories within those story arcs. And so that answers your question. So you start documenting the stories of your customers, and it could just be a thought. So one word, a sentence or two, or a phrase. So those stories start coming top of mind. So start building the habit of thinking in those terms. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah. And then within that, so perhaps, and that could be, customer success stories can also be people that you've inspired. So it could be family, friends.
Mm,
It doesn't just have to be like a customer per se, because sometimes people are new in the game and they're like, I don't have any customers. I'm like, well, perhaps you've inspired your mother, your father, brother, friends, somebody
mm.
walking down the street, for example. Does that answer the question?
That's really moving. Thank you for that, and thank you for your vulnerability and your trust by giving me that personal background. I appreciate that. Um, that's interesting. I don't think we ever go that deep, but I know you work with a lot of solopreneurs. So I think, they have to draw from that personal story and inspiration. Um, but I like that. I like the idea that even from the challenging times, there's always that opportunity to learn from it or in being inspired or inspiring others. And I think I really, and what is it that we learned and what do we do about that in that life, that stage of our life, right? Yeah, with our customers, we do it something differently, but there is some common areas on that. Like, so what we find with our customers, our biggest challenge that they have in selling their solutions is the status quo. So it's not competition. It's about their customers are just used to doing things the same way over and over and over again. And so resistance to change, maybe lack of acknowledgement of how the world is changing. So the way we help customers frame that story is to say, start off with the top line, like how is the world changing? And how does that world changing affect you and what you do in your business? And what are those challenges that derive from that changing world? And then you can talk about how each of these challenges can be tackled with something that you might offer them that's different, that's unique. Um, so there is some, so it's even though you're drawing, you talk more about the personal aspects and challenges of people. I'm talking about just general world changes and how it affects others. But, personal aspect too, like, we always talk about that some people, they're afraid of change, but they're also afraid of losing their own position and their own careers. And so there is some personal aspect to it as well. Yeah.
Well, and I would challenge you right now. You, at the beginning of the conversation, said there was tension in your life that forced you to create this new company.
That's right.
So that is what's that? Your job tension years or the job tension story arc, and perhaps there was literal headbutting with bosses. Perhaps there was literal headbutting with, customers. I don't know, but there's going to be rich details in there that are going to lead to the birth. And you probably talk about this a lot, and I haven't given you an opportunity to talk about it. However, assuming that you don't, or maybe you do, um, you start talking about that pain point, those tension points, that inspiration for the new company for Pinch Marketing. And again, everybody can go to pinch.marketing to check out Martin's stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally I hear you, and I think I'm going to draw inspiration from that conversation for sure because I'm not sure if I think about that often enough, at that sometimes. I mean, I think, like you said, there was a pain point. I needed to solve it. And there was a birth of something new. In this case, it was the business. But you're right. Like, we are touched by our personal stories, our personal tragedies and, family or otherwise. And I'm sure, we have to find a way to get out of that and find something new. Yeah, I don't know if we ask ourselves often enough, how those difficult moments have really helped shape us and made us better. And I think that's something it's to really think about. I think more often than we do is to think about, like you said, even my birth of the birth of Pinch, and and who knows, maybe I'd still be working for the big boss man and being miserable to this day if that didn't happen. That bad moment didn't hit me in that moment in life. And I think we need to be thankful, even of those perhaps bad moments, bad bosses, bad spouses, bad whatever, that
Whatever.
inspired us to think, oh, forced us to do things differently, right?
Yeah, and yeah, time heals all wounds, so let's say that.
Right.
But I would also say you had a story. You were frustrated with the status quo, is my guess, at that job with those bosses in that corporate life. And you're like, the status quo is killing me.
Yeah.
Perhaps literally, perhaps you were burning out, perhaps it affected your relationships, perhaps it affected your relationship with your kids. I don't know the depth of it or I can only imagine, but literally the status quo was killing me. Hence the birth of pinch marketing. We find what people have a problem with is the status quo, and it's killing their company, just like it was killing me. So I don't know, just as an idea, I'm just riffing right now, having some fun.
Hey, I mean, I got to write that down. Hopefully, I'll re-listen to this later. Be like, hey, I talk to my partners. I'm like, hey, we got to really listen, think about that. But, um, yeah, I think absolutely. I think that's now that I think about it, there's so much truth into that, right? Like and I think that's when we talk about pinch and why the name to some of our prospects and customers is that it helped us in that transformative moment. Um, and we also want to position it to our customers, say, hey, we'll help you out in the pinch. When you are in trouble, we can help you out, right? So I think it's we learn how to help ourselves, but also help you um, figure it out as well, right? So enable you to find a better way.
I love it. And I think if from what I've gleaned from from our conversation and so much of what you said, and gleaned is kind of like saying learned, right? Learn from you or about what you do. It's so much is really helping these companies that you work with dial in their narrative and their story and make it relatable and take that knowledge that they have, this incredible knowledge, because clearly in the
Mm.
tech space, you're dealing with incredibly, I mean, brilliant people all the time, I'm imagining, who are really creating solutions that can affect change that I can't probably comprehend. And you're saying, hey, man, like, let's take that knowledge, let's make it digestible, let's turn it into a more concise, cohesive thought stream, whatever, however you want to say that. And now let's use that for marketing and pinch. Uh, you're helping people create that SEO content, that these marketing campaigns around this narrative. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I don't think I could have said it better myself. So thank you for that. I'm smiling because I'm like, that sounds really good. I need to use that. Um, yeah, and I think I now that I think about it, I think we are truly fortunate that the people we speak with are of super high caliber. Like, like they really know their stuff. And you're right, like the technologies that they work with or they work on uh, are truly changing people's lives, right? And um, I guess I should be really feel privileged that I've had the opportunity to work with some super smart people and learn from them, and help them figure out their what their voice is and um, how to find the audience to listen to that brilliance that they have in them, right? So, yeah, that makes me smile. It makes me think like, oh yeah, well, this is I get to give myself a tap on the shoulder. It's good stuff. I like that. I really do. I like the fact that that's really what I think what drives us. Going back to that inspiration, like what drives me. I think this is exactly what it is. I think you found it. Is that it's that ability to take that amazing knowledge that's out there and being able to help communicate that to the audience that really truly is going to find value in that. I truly believe that marketing can do that. And being able to do that through storytelling and creativity, um, and help to spread the word of something that's super, super interesting. And trust me, selling security solution doesn't sound very sexy, but if you're talking about helping save people's lives in a way by helping them protect their privacy or their data or their life is, right? So I think it's finding that story that's going to be um, inspirational, I think.
Mm, mm. Do you
So yeah.
have a favorite customer story or two? And maybe you could give me sort of where they were when they found you and how you were able to, you know, cross that bridge, help them create that narrative, and then maybe some success.
I think there's a few that I'm thinking about. You know, it's funny, I don't do that enough to think about some of the successes for some of our customers, I think. But you know, as I alluded to in the past, some of them may not be appreciative if I tell their story. But I think, you know, there was definitely instances where I think I was particularly proud, you know, taking content that was what I would consider dry, you know, the difficult, very technical. And one of the stories, like I can't take all the credit for it. One of the people who was working for me at the time developed a comic strip of this character of this IT pro that has this challenge and literally like a comic book story that took something super complex and made it into a very creative storytelling um, idea and visually appealing, and it was super popular. Um, People loved it, although um, I got in trouble with one of the prospects who received that piece of content um, because we gave that character a name. I think it was a Dave or something, and one of the customers or prospects who received that letter was a Dave, and and I guess that the story resonated so much that this person actually thought that we're somehow talking about his story, and he was so upset. He felt that we were violating his privacy and his how dare we. He was super upset, I remember. And almost, even though I had to discuss that with my boss at the time, and what we did for them for that customer um created a bit of a negativity aspect of that all. Part of me was happy. It's like, oh my God, if I reach this person at such a personal level, then maybe we did something right. Maybe it didn't work for that customer, but I know from other pieces of content that we've created that that campaign really resonated with people, that perhaps otherwise it would have been a boring story. So yeah, there you go. That's one. That's one.
That's amazing. You spoke so well to a person. You that what you talked about. I'm looking through my notes. What was it?
Yeah,
Uh
Dave. He landed me in trouble with my bosses. He literally complained to, I think, the one of the higher ups of the company that I was working with, and I'm like, wow. Um,
or
it
yeah,
gave me a chuckle. It gave me a bit of a chuckle,
yeah, yeah.
but also,
Well, I was saying you spoke to the accounts based marketing or
marketing.
accounts
Yeah.
based marketing
Yeah.
ABM,
Mhm.
strategic, hyper personalized, and you did that and you created it.
But that
And
wasn't even that. It was just a general Dave who was sent to hundreds of people, but I just happened to found a Dave that had that problem. And yeah, that wasn't even ABM at the time, but
uh,
yeah, it was. I think, but that's what ABM could do for people if it really create that narrative that's going to be super hyper personalized. But that being said, you got to be careful. Like especially, I think if you're in a healthcare sector, be
oh
careful
my
with what I'm
gosh.
saying here. You don't want to hit people with you know, hitting some of the pain points that are quite personal, right? So you have to figure out the balance.
Yeah, well, I imagine on one hand too, with what you do at Pinch, you're saving companies to a certain extent because if they have marketing that worked and is not working, so and is not working anymore, perhaps their revenue is drying up, perhaps their ROI has decreased or gone negative or is decreasing at a frightening rate. And so then they come to you and they go, "Hey, Martin and Pinch." Again, everybody can go to pinchmarketing.com and check out Martin's super streamlined site. And you can reach out to, I'm assuming that's somebody on your team at the bottom. But anyway, you're taking people who are in a distressed marketing situation, perhaps a distressed revenue situation, and you're helping them get back on track. I mean, is that
Yeah,
literally what's
I
going
mean,
down?
some of them are in, I want to say, in dire straits. I think most of them are not, but a lot of my customers just looking for new ways, new innovative, interesting things, ways, creativity to do things slightly differently. By no means I'm trying to suggest that any of my clients
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
need me as much as I like to say. I'm not saving anybody. However, I would like to say that I've been proud to say that we've been part of some campaigns that were unique, creative, and I think they created some buzz, and I'm proud of that. Did I save them? No, but I helped them to maybe create something new, new angles and new innovative ways of positioning themselves. So that part I will say, yeah, sure, we can do that.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thank you for downplaying that. And I didn't mean to imply that any of your customers were in a distressed situation. You can feel free to cut that part out.
That's right.
But
No, thank you for that, Michelle. I appreciate that. No, no, yeah, I don't want to call from a client saying, "Pardon, we really don't have that big problem, do we?" No, no, they don't. But that being said, I think we help them bring out their best. There you go.
well, I mean, are you? I mean, people that are using you must be, and I'm just trying to get a. Well, I'll just keep going down this line of reasoning. People are hoping for a positive return on equity on their ad spend, on their marketing campaigns, on
Yeah.
their on what they're doing, and obviously, I'm assuming they're hoping they're gonna get some brand recognition, some brand build, some brand goodwill, all these
Hmm.
things. But ultimately, they're like, I hope this leads to more revenue and hopefully it's positive return on investment. Yes. I mean,
Absolutely.
you must have some of that going on where you're helping people.
Absolutely, and depending on the buyer's journey can be a lengthy one, especially in the B2B tech space. Like some of the technologies that are being sold are sold for hundreds, if not millions of dollars, right? So they're not an easy sell. It's not like I can go on a e-commerce web platforms like buy. Uh, I mean, some could maybe, but not most of them, right? It's usually a very complex buying cycle. But what I'm saying is that, yeah, you have to go through the buyer's journey. And in some cases, it could be 6 months, could be a year, in some cases longer. So you have to figure out what your marketing tactics are each of those stages. The awareness stage, trying to build some awareness around your solutions, then the selection or phase where you're trying to sell a story of like, okay, you understand that there's a need. Now you have to figure out why us story. And then the selective process of like saying, okay, why us versus the other folks, right? And then after that, okay, you get the customer, but now it's like, okay, but many of them, you have to retain those customers, right? So retention is a huge part of marketing. So now it's customer marketing takes over. Like, how do you drive adoption of the product and solution? How do you make them feel good post-purchase so they don't feel like, did I just waste $500,000, right? So you have to make them feel good, continuously make the customer feel good about their decision to be with you. So I think it's an ongoing circle. It never ends. So hopefully your holistic marketing approach and plan should take every of those stages into consideration and make sure you have that set up properly and don't just do one thing and forget it. No, you have to have a robust integrated plan, hopefully throughout the full cycle, right? So um, yeah, at least that's what I encourage customers to do. Yeah, for sure.
I love it. Great answer. Thank you. I remember when I was getting my finance degree and in a marketing class back in the late 80s, early 90s. That would be 1990,
I hear you.
1989.
I've been there, done that. Yeah.
Um, but when they said they were saying the car companies spend billions of dollars, obviously, on advertisements, and they're one of the,
Mhm.
I mean, they spend a ridiculous amount of money. But I'll never forget when my marketing professor said, and the bulk of their money of their ads are designed to validate your buying decision.
That's right.
I was like, oh my gosh, what speaks to what you're saying that, hey, it's people buy and then they need to feel good that they bought. So, um,
Yeah.
we could go on and on and on man, I've learned a ton from you, Martin, and it's been great.
Likewise. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great to get the marketing angle from more of the tech side of things, like a literal
Mm.
tech company security space, online security space, however you want to say that. So it's been super fun and a little bit eye-opening for me. So I appreciate that very much. Martin,
No, thank you.
yeah, I want to be cognizant of time. So I would ask you, is there anything, inevitably, whenever we hang up from a call like this, somebody goes, "Oh man, I wished I'd said this," or "I meant to say this," or things like that. Does anything come to your mind that you want to say?
I guess I just want to draw the circle back to where we started. I mean, I thought, to think about what inspires me, and I think it brought me back to the story that and the narrative and the conversation with you really helped me really solidify that, which is really, I'm really appreciative of that. So thank you. Um, like you said, I draw the parallels between my own pain points and my own world to what we do for our customers. And I think ultimately that what gives me inspiration to continue doing this day after day. So thank you for that. I really helped me flash that out. So I really, really appreciate it. I'm sure that as soon as we hang up, there will be, oh, wait, I was going to say something else, but nothing comes to mind right now. So thank you for that. But ultimately, if any of your listeners have any follow-up questions for me, for sure, I invite them to reach out to me through either LinkedIn or my website. And yeah, hopefully we can start a good conversation and go from there.
Amazing, Martin. Thank you so much. And again, everybody go to pinch.marketing. And that's a way they can reach out to you. They can go to the bottom, fill out the little question, send it off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the form. Amazing. Awesome. I will hit stop and we will say goodbye offline.
Mischa, thank you so much once again. Appreciate it. It was great talking to you and your audience.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. For resources to help you sell your stuff, go to belove.media/resources. That's belove.media/resources. And be sure to subscribe, comment, 5-star, and share. Thank you again for listening.